Have you ever looked at your life, really looked at it, and felt a quiet, unsettling feeling that you might be moving in the wrong direction? Not a dramatic crisis, just a slow, creeping awareness that the years are passing, and somehow, the version of yourself you always imagined becoming still feels far away. You're working, you're trying, you're doing what you were told to do, and yet, something isn't clicking. Meanwhile, you look around and see certain people, people who seem to move faster, think clearer, rise higher, people who, by their mid-20s or early 30s, already seem to have figured out something that most of us are still searching for well into our 40s. What is that something? That's exactly what we're going to explore today, because there's a pattern, a very specific, all very learnable pattern, behind why people from elite environments like Harvard seem to figure life out earlier than everyone else. And it has almost nothing to do with their grades, their families, or the name on their diploma. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what that pattern is, and more importantly, you're going to see how it applies directly to your own life, right now, no matter where you are or how old you are. If this sounds like something you need to hear, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because the ideas in here took some people decades to discover. You don't have to wait that long. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Daniel. Daniel was intelligent, hard-working. He graduated, got a stable job, played by the rules. He believed that if he just worked long enough, stayed loyal enough, and waited patiently enough, life would eventually open up for him. He was 43 years old when he finally admitted to himself that it hadn't. Not in the way he'd hoped. He wasn't unhappy exactly. But he felt like he'd been running a race without ever knowing where the finish line was. Like he'd been answering questions that nobody had actually asked him. Like, somewhere along the way, he had confused being busy with moving forward. And the worst part, he couldn't point to a single moment where it went wrong. It was gradual, invisible. 1,000 small choices that each seemed reasonable at the time, but collectively, quietly, had led him somewhere he never intended to go. Most people won't admit this out loud, but if you're honest with yourself, you know exactly what Daniel felt. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us were never taught how to think about our lives strategically. We were taught to follow instructions, to stay in line, to be patient and wait our turn. And those things aren't wrong exactly, but they're incomplete because they assume someone else has already designed a path worth walking, and most of the time, no one has. This is where the real difference begins. When researchers, journalists, and entrepreneurs study the patterns behind high-achieving graduates from elite institutions, they find something surprising. It's not that these people are smarter. It's not that they have more discipline or more drive than everyone else. What separates them is more subtle and far more powerful. The first truth is this: they operate with clarity of direction. And this is where most people get it wrong. Most people spend years asking, what should I do with my life? And that question, as innocent as it sounds, is actually one of the most paralyzing questions you can ask yourself, because it's too vague. It puts you at the center of a universe where all the options feel overwhelming and nothing feels certain enough to commit to. High achievers learn to ask a different question, not what should I do, but what problems are worth solving, not what career will make me happy, but where do my strengths meet real-world needs? That small shift in framing changes everything. When you chase problems instead of titles, you stop waiting for permission and start moving. You stop collecting options and start making decisions. And decisions, even imperfect ones, compound in a way that passivity never can. Think about it. And two people start at the same place. One spends 5 years figuring themselves out. The other spends 5 years experimenting, adjusting, and refining. A decade later, they're not just a little different. They're in completely different worlds. But it gets deeper. The second truth is about environment, and this one is often overlooked because it feels too simple. When you spend your days surrounded by people who think at a high level, who talk about ideas, challenge each other's assumptions, and hold each other to high standards, something changes in you without you even noticing. Average starts to feel uncomfortable instead of safe. There's a concept in psychology sometimes called ambient motivation. It's the idea that your surroundings create a baseline expectation for what's normal. If everyone around you is ambitious, and you start to see ambition as the default, not the exception. If everyone around you is mediocre, you unconsciously calibrate yourself to that level, even if you believe you're aiming higher. This is one of the most honest, slightly uncomfortable things you can examine about your own life. Not your intentions, but your environment. Who are you spending the most time with? What are the conversations in your daily life actually about? Are they about ideas, growth, and building something? Or are they mostly about problems, entertainment, and other people? This isn't about judging anyone. It's about recognizing that your environment is shaping you whether you want it to or not. The third truth is about networks. And before you roll your eyes, this isn't about networking events or LinkedIn connections. This is about something much older and much more human. The people who rise faster in life almost always have two things, others don't. Mentors and peers who have already gone where they want to go. A mentor doesn't just give you advice. A good mentor collapses time. They hand you the map they spent years drawing. They tell you which roads are dead ends before you spend 3 years finding out yourself. They introduce you to people who would otherwise take you a decade to reach. And this is the part that almost nobody talks about. Opportunities don't come from job boards or lucky breaks. They come from relationships. Specifically, from the kind of trust that only builds through consistent, genuine connections over time. Most of us were never taught how to build these relationships intentionally. We wait to be noticed, as we hope someone influential will stumble across our work. We're polite but passive. The people who move faster treat relationship building as a skill, something they develop deliberately, not something they leave to chance. Have you ever felt like you were heading in the wrong direction, or realized something important about yourself too late? Leave a comment below, because what you're about to hear next might be the most important part of this entire video. The fourth truth is one that quietly separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck. It's not a strategy. It's not a technique. It's a belief. It's the belief that your voice matters. This sounds obvious, but for most people it isn't. Think about how many times you've had an idea in a meeting and said nothing. How many times you've disagreed with something but nodded along. How many times you've known the right answer and stayed quiet. Not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid of how you'd be perceived. That habit, repeated thousands of times over years and years, creates a version of yourself that has learned to wait, learned to follow, learned to suppress the very instincts that could have made the biggest difference. Confidence doesn't come from success. It comes from repeatedly putting yourself in situations where your voice has consequences and surviving them, where your opinion is challenged and you stand by it or refine it, where you fail and you recover. The most dangerous place to live is in the comfort zone of competence, where you're good enough to avoid failure but not challenged enough to grow. And the fifth truth is about leverage. And this one is about rethinking how you approach effort altogether. Hard work is necessary, but it is not sufficient. And here's the uncomfortable evidence. Most people who work themselves to exhaustion are not the ones who end up with the most impact. The people who truly build something meaningful learn to identify where effort multiplies, not just where it's spent. They ask, what is the one decision I could make right now that would make all other decisions easier? They aim their energy at leverage points. This might mean investing time in a skill that opens 5 new doors. It might mean choosing an industry on the right side of growth rather than fighting for scraps in one that's shrinking. It might mean building a platform that earns credibility over time rather than taking every short-term opportunity that pays well now. Working harder at the wrong thing is how years disappear. And now for the most dangerous truth of all, the one that makes every other insight on this list either work or fail. It's the habit of ownership. Not just ownership of your successes, ownership of everything, your circumstances, your results, your patterns, your outcomes. Here's what that looks like in real life. When something goes wrong, most people look outward first. They look at the economy, their upbringing, their manager, their timing, their luck. And look, some of that might even be true. Life is not always fair. The starting line is not equal for everyone. But here's the thing. The moment you give your power away by waiting for conditions to change, you become dependent on a world that was never designed with your happiness in mind. The people who figure life out faster have this deeply internalized. They cannot control everything, but they can control their response to everything. They can control where they invest their attention. They can control what they're willing to learn. They can control whether they move or stay still. And that small act of reclaiming ownership, again and again, in the face of failure, disappointment, and uncertainty, is what compounds into a life that looks, from the outside, like they must have had some kind of advantage. They did. But not the one you think. Let's come back to where we started, that quiet feeling. The one that shows up in still moments and asks, is this really the path I meant to be on? Here's what I want you to take away from this. The real reason people from elite environments seem to figure life out faster isn't the institution. It isn't the connections, the prestige, or even the resources. It's the combination of clear thinking, deliberate environments, strong relationships, earned confidence, intelligent effort, and personal accountability. None of those things belong to Harvard. They belong to anyone willing to apply them. So the practical question isn't, how do I get access to that world? The question is, which of these 6 truths am I ignoring in my own life right now? Start there. Just one. Choose clearer questions. Build a better environment. Invest in one relationship that challenges you to grow. Speak up once this week where you normally go quiet. Find the lever that multiplies your effort instead of just adding to it. And when something isn't working, own it completely before you explain it. These aren't life hacks. They're not shortcuts. They're the kind of deep, slow burn practices that look unremarkable for a long time before they suddenly look like genius. Daniel, the man from the beginning of this video, didn't find a magic opportunity. He found these ideas. And then he spent 3 years, quietly and consistently, applying them. He's not a Harvard graduate. He never will be. But he's finally, genuinely moving in the direction he always meant to go. That's available to you too, right now. If this video made you stop and think about your own life, even for a moment, that's worth something. And share it with someone who needs to hear it, like the video, if it added value to your day. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you want to keep going, there's another video on your screen right now. Watch it. The people who take that next step are exactly the ones these ideas were made for.